Good morning, students. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Robert Frost poem, Mending Wall. A couple of you have made some good observations about it on our discussions, but since this one hasn't attracted a lot of attention, and since it is such an important American poem, I wanted to go over it a little bit with you. But first, if you will indulge me, I'm going to read it. And when I read it, I want you to listen to the rhythm of the words, and I also want you to listen to the lines that are repeated. There are two lines that are repeated, and I want you to pay attention to those. Mending wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone. But they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen, to each. And some are loaves, and some so nearly balls we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more. There where it is we do not need the wall. He is all pine, and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well, he says again, good fences make good neighbors. So there it is, there's the poem. One of the things I want you to notice about it is the form of the poem. You can see that the lines are relatively, visually they look to be the same length. So let's look at how it scans. Okay, something there is that doesn't love a wall. It's kind of my crude scansion there. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. Now, when I read it that way, you might be able to hear the beats, right? There are, this is an iambic pentameter poem. Something there is that doesn't love a wall. So there are 5 iambs, in other words, 5 feet with the stress on the second syllable. And you might remember what it's called when the lines of iambic pentameter do not rhyme. You remember from the reading guide? If iambic pentameter doesn't rhyme, it's called blank verse. So this is a poem written in blank verse. Okay. All right, so let's just look at what's happening in the poem. We begin with this line. The speaker says, something there is that doesn't love a wall. We're already prepared for this idea that something doesn't want this wall to be here, right? That sends the frozen groundswell under it. So this is kind of like why in the spring there's lots of potholes. In the spring, they find all of these gaps in the wall. It might be because of the frozen groundswell. It might be the work of hunters. Okay, they don't really know. Nobody has seen or made or heard them made these holes in the wall that need repairing, but they're there. So on a spring day, the neighbors get together to fix the fence, to mend the wall. Excuse me. Okay, so in the second half of the poem, after this is established, He comments on a place where we don't need the wall. The speaker says, "He is all pine, and I am apple orchard," which of course refers to what kind of trees are on each side of the fence, on each neighbor's property. But it might be useful to think about what the pine and apple orchard suggests. Some readers think that this pine, this neighbor's pine, suggests a practicality, where the apple orchard might be a little lighter, a little more fun, a little more pleasant for the neighbor. And the speaker points out, "My apple trees are never going to get across and eat your cones. Why do we need this fence?" But the neighbor says, "Good fences make good neighbors." He really believes this idea that fences are good for us. And that's a pretty popular idea, right? A lot of neighborhoods today, you see fences around private property, lawns divided up by fences. Building a wall, building a fence is a popular idea in today's political discourse, relatively speaking. There's a lot of talk about building walls. But the speaker isn't sure. He says, "Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why? Why do they make good neighbors?" The speaker really questions this. Isn't it where there are cows? I mean, it would make sense if there are cows, but we don't have any cows. The speaker says, "Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense." So again, this speaker is really questioning why we need a wall. What will the results of a wall be? How will it affect us? And then he gets even a little more mischievous. He wants to say elves, right? Something there is that doesn't love a wall and wants it down. I could say that it was elves, but it's not, and I'd rather he said it for himself. This speaker seems to want his neighbor to see the world the way that he does. But that doesn't happen, right? So here we have the second repetition of something there is that doesn't love a wall, the second iteration of that line. We open with that line, something there is that doesn't love a wall, and the speaker returns to it again down here. If a line of poetry is repeated, you know that it's probably pretty important. However, you may have noticed that the other line that's repeated is this one: "Good fences make good neighbors." And that's an expression you may have heard before. It, in fact, is repeated again at the end of the poem. It's the final line of the poem: "Good fences make good neighbors." And this is what the neighbor says, right? The neighbor who moves in darkness. And he will not go behind his father's saying. He is loyal to what his father said. And he likes having thought of it so well, he says again, "Good fences make good neighbors." So again, we have these two differing ideas between these neighbors about the value of a fence. Something there is that doesn't love a wall on the one hand, and good fences make good neighbors on the other. Some readers interpret this as Frost's commentary on good old American individualism, and whether maybe we do a little too much to build walls and fences between us, without thinking about what effects those might have. So that is Mending Wall. There's plenty more to say about it, but I just wanted to give you a brief recap and a little bit of perspective on what it might mean.